Hi, it's Willow here, and I'm here to do a video about a subject that I've been covering for a number of years now, over 10 years now, which is the use of astrology and numerology by the power establishment to time orchestrated attacks and orchestrated events. Okay. So, what I've seen by studying astrology, what I've seen by studying the dates of things that are occurring, is that events are being intentionally planned, and in particular, traumatic events, violent events, attacks, false flags, all of these types of things, and also geoengineered weather wars. All of these things are being timed according to certain symbolic dates and also according to certain astrological events. Okay, and so I'm going to outline some of the dates that I've discovered are being utilized. And so this obviously isn't a lighthearted topic. This is a topic that is dark and sinister and uncovers a lot of state created violence. And it's not going to be for everyone. But the reason that I talk about this is because I think that we need to become aware of these types of manipulations and orchestrations so that we don't fall for it, so that we don't get sucked into the broader agenda that is always tied to these events, right? And so that we don't get sucked into blaming ourselves, blaming God, blaming Mother Nature for things that are actually being committed intentionally by people in the power establishment, by people in positions of power. And these people in positions of power are, at the basically they're the pyramid cap in a pyramid scheme of power that's corrupted our planet for thousands of years now. And because of this current scheme that's going on, the biggest psychological operative in human history, because that's going on, we kind of have this window of opportunity where it's becoming much more transparent and much more blatant, the types of orchestrations that are underway. And so people can see through things to a greater degree right now, simply because they're, the situations that are unfolding are so surreal, so obscene, so anti-human, so crazy, that it's really forcing people to take a look at these power structures and the people that claim to be our leaders within these power structures. Okay, so I'm gonna try to not make this video too heady, too intense. As I've mentioned in a previous video, I don't consider myself an astrology vlogger. I consider myself an astrology writer. So I write about these subjects, but making a video about it is just another way to get the information out there. Okay, so as I say, for about the past 10 years, I've been covering these orchestrations and the way that astrology is being used, the way numerology is being used. And something that I just came across recently, that I actually missed the first time around, is that it is related to the Deepwater Horizon explosion. Now, I did a video about the 10th anniversaries of both the Deepwater Horizon explosion and the Fukushima nuclear disaster. The Deepwater Horizon offshore drilling rig exploded April 20th, 2010, and the Fukushima nuclear disaster happened March 11th, 2011. And both of those dates, I have discovered, are dates that are commonly used for these types of events or these types of attacks. Okay, so the new information that I just came across is that April 20th has a long, long history of orchestrated events. And I'm sorry that I didn't pick up on this before I wrote the article, but honestly, the article is already so chock full of information that a secondary article is probably necessary on this front. So yes, April 20th what day is April 20th? Well, it is Adolf Hitler's birthday. Yep, April 20th, 1889, Adolf Hitler was born. And there is a series of events that have happened on April 20th. I'm just going to focus on the more recent ones, but I will include a link to an article that outlines many of these events that went on. Okay, so as far as the Deepwater Horizon tie-in, April 20th, 1889, Hitler was born. April 20th, 1993, 76 people died in Waco, Texas. They were part of a group called the Branch Davidians, and they were portrayed as sort of psycho, delusional cult members, violent cult members by the mainstream media. But basically, what the counterculture believes happened there was that the FBI moved in and basically killed those people, basically started a fire and killed those people. Now, the official story was that the Branch Davidians lit their own selves on fire, lit their own home on fire, whatever you want to believe. But basically, April 20th, 1993, 76 people died in Waco, Texas, with the FBI present, the FBI attempting to raid the compound, the Branch Davidian compound. Okay, April 19th, now one day off. April 19th, 1995, Timothy McVeigh bombs the Oklahoma City Alfred P. Murrah building. He kills 168 people, or reported 168 people, and wounds about 500 more. And Timothy McVeigh's stated reason for doing this was to avenge the deaths at Waco. So to, Now, I believe Timothy McVeigh was part of the military. So, as far as the real nitty gritty details, I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty details as far as all the connections here. But again, we've got this pattern of April 20th. April 20th, 2010, the Deepwater Horizon offshore drilling rig explodes. And many believed right from the beginning that this was intentional sabotage tied to a short selling scheme where they short sold shares of BP, planning for those shares to dip dramatically in price. So there you have it. Okay, so that's April 20th. April 20th obviously also is a cannabis-related holiday, 420, right? And I think 420, originally they claimed that it was associated with a law, some type of law that had the numbers 4 and 20 involved in it. I don't know the background of that one, but again, that's another thing to raise. So what we see is a pattern of orchestrated attacks or orchestrated events occurring on April 20th. Okay, so other dates that are often used are, of course, September 11th. Okay, that's a big one. And September 11th also has a fairly substantial history. I'm not going to cover every possible element of what's gone on this date. I'm just going to cover the basics so that you have an outline. Okay, so the thing that drew my attention is September 11th, 1973. Okay, that was the day that democratically elected Salvador Allende was assassinated in a CIA-backed coup in Chile, and the bloody dictator Augusto Pinochet was installed, again backed by the CIA. Okay, so that was a major event that happened on September 11th. September 11th, 1990, George Bush Sr. announces the New World Order to U.S. Congress in a televised address. So you can still find, for anyone who thinks that the New World Order is a conspiracy, that crazy conspiracy theorists like me have come up with, you have so-called leader after so-called leader announcing the plans for the New World Order right out in the open. And again, September 11th, 1990 was a big one where George Bush Sr. is announcing the New World Order to U.S. Congress. We've also had Biden talking about the New World Order. We've had, I don't think there would be a single leader who hasn't mentioned it. Stephen Harper used to call it global governance. That's another word for New World Order. Basically global government. So unelected global government. And I don't even believe in the elected governments myself at this point, but basically, this global body that's dictating our decisions top down, dictating decisions to national, and local governments. Okay, September 11th, 2001, of course. What happened that day? Well, that day there was, probably the biggest false flag in U.S. history. And that was the takedown of the two World Trade Center towers, Building 7 and the Pentagon. So that again is sort of like a trauma imprint, right? There are these trauma imprints that are being created and played on throughout history. And so September 11th, April 20th, September 11th, those are two dates that we see being regularly used. Now, I've really covered this a lot on the blog, which is March 11th and March 19th, 20th. So March 11th and March equinox, those are both dates that are used. Now, I don't know if they're just replaying the 11, right? September 11th, March 11th. Who knows what the real, disturbing and sinister reasons are why they're using these dates for these orchestrated events. But they are. Okay, so March 11th and March 19th, 20th. And in particular, I've noticed a pattern of attacks around March equinox when Uranus is either changing signs, so ingressing a sign, or there's some tie-in to Uranus. So what happened so going back to 2003, okay, March 19th, 20th, 2003. Uranus enters Pisces and the United States invades Iraq. Okay, the United States invades Iraq on the heels of September 11th. Okay, so these are kind of tied in together, right? September 11th, 2001, they create the impetus for the Patriot Act, for surveilling people, for intense policing of air travel and other travel. Just general spying, prolonged detention, being held without charge, without legal representation, all of these types of things that, Guantanamo Bay and the torture and all of this type of stuff. So September 11, 2001 then leads into March 19th, 20th, 2003, which is when they actually invade Iraq. Of course, so the ground invasion started, the air invasion started March 19th, I believe, and the ground invasion March 20th. So that is equinox. That's straight up equinox, and Uranus was entering Pisces. So Uranus was entering a new sign. Now, Uranus relates to many things. It relates to the unexpected and using shock. So these events are designed to create shock and trauma in the population, right? They're violent, they're unexpected for anyone who's not in on the orchestration. They're kind of coming out of nowhere. And so again, doing this video is sort of trying to outline some of this stuff so that people can see it ahead of time, right? And not get sucked into this. And so that we can see that these are real violent psychopaths who have no respect for human life, who are calling themselves our leaders, who are not our leaders. Okay, so Uranus relates to, shock and awe, right? They've used that term. It also relates to uranium. So anything related to radioactivity, radiation, in particular, derived from uranium. Okay, so the United States invades Iraq March 19th, 20th in 2003. And they also unleash a massive amount of depleted uranium munitions during that attack. And the depleted uranium munitions then create a radioactive crisis. Because the munitions, when they strike the target, break down into dust, and that dust is radioactive, which is then breathed in, swallowed, eaten by both the soldiers and the people that are being attacked. And so we have seen drastic health problems in NATO soldiers and also in the people of Iraq, and especially around Fallujah. That was one of the areas that was heavily, heavily shelled with depleted uranium munitions. There are such severe birth defects going on in the Fallujah area, or there were, that the women were actually told to stop having babies because their genetic lines had basically been destroyed through this depleted uranium munitions dust. And so I would see this as being covert nuclear warfare tied to uranium, tied to Uranus. Okay, so then we go, Uranus spends like 7 or 8 years in each sign. Okay, so that was the ingress of Pisces. Then we move to 2011. Uranus is moving into, March 2011, Uranus is moving into Aries. And we, of course, March 11th, 2011, we have the Fukushima nuclear disaster, which I do believe was an orchestrated event. intentional sabotage. And that unleashed, of course, massive amounts of radioactive fallout into the atmosphere and into the ocean, Pacific Ocean. And those releases have continued to this day. So 10 years on, there are regular releases of radioactivity into the ocean coming from Fukushima. Fukushima fallout has been found in food, milk, water, sand, wine, all kinds of areas since the beginning. Kelp beds. It's been found. We were blanketed in Fukushima fallout, and there was a massive cover up of that. And again, this Fukushima fallout continues to this day. As I mentioned in the article, there is an ongoing collapse of the Pacific ocean ecosystem. There are unusual mortality events being studied for both seals and whales, ongoing since 2011, since the year Fukushima happened. Okay. The other thing that happened in March 2011 was the bombing of Libya and the assassination of Gaddafi. And the bombing of Libya happened March 19th, 2011. Okay. So again, right at equinox. And again, like I said, Uranus was moving into Aries at that time. So again, we see an element of covert nuclear warfare with Fukushima going on. Okay, so fast forward to Uranus moving into the next new sign. Now, Uranus actually moved into the new sign of Taurus in March 2019. And I was actually expecting the big event to happen March 2019 because of this pattern that I was seeing. Now, they shifted it up a little bit, but they also shifted it up for good reason astrologically, okay? So March 2019 was when Uranus was moving into Taurus, I believe re-entering Taurus. But March 2020 is when the real event was rolled out, right? The real orchestrated event. And that is the orchestrated pandemic, the attempt at medical martial law, globalized medical martial law, basically the authoritarian power grab, and also the acceleration of the 5G rollout. That also happened. Now, they timed it to March 11th, 2020. So March 11th, 2020 was when the World Health Organization declared the pandemic. March 11th. Okay, so there we get it, the March 11th again. March 11th was also, of course, when the Fukushima nuclear disaster happened. So the very day, they're using that March 11th day, hammering it, just like they're hammering the equinox day. Okay, so the 5G rollout is introducing massive amounts of artificial electromagnetic radiation into our environment. So this also I would see as being covert nuclear warfare tied to Uranus. Now, the difference in the astrology is that in March 2020, so what happened was Saturn and Pluto formed a historic conjunction at 22 degrees Capricorn in January 2020. And then Saturn moved into Aquarius at March equinox 2020. And so Saturn was in this really potent conjunction still to Pluto. And then it moves into Aquarius, which is disposited by Uranus and Taurus. So the key influence over that ingress of Saturn into Aquarius was Uranus and Taurus. And Saturn is leading the way into Aquarius. So Saturn opened up the sign of Aquarius. There was an attempt to cement the 5G rollout, right? Aquarius related to technology, science, robotics, automation, eugenics. There was an attempt to cement that 5G rollout, that infrastructure. Then Jupiter followed into the sign in December 2020. They formed their conjunction at 0 degrees Aquarius on December solstice. And then Pluto is going to enter Aquarius in 2023, early 2023. So that's the astrology, the difference in the astrology related to this most recent orchestrated event. Okay, there's a global orchestrated event. Is that the astrology was a little bit different, but there was still a strong tie-in to that Uranus ingress of Taurus, right? Uranus moving into Taurus. Uranus in Taurus indicates shocks and trauma related to income, money, ability to provide the physical need, provide for your physical needs, stability. And so we see an attack against small businesses, people who are independently earning income, not just people like, the small businesses whole industries are being attacked right now. Millions and millions of people are out of work. Millions and millions of people have not really drawn much of a wage for in a year. I mean, this is a desperate situation that people are being put into. I would say intentionally all the way. So you can see the elements of Uranus in Taurus there. Okay, like I said, I've written about this stuff on the blog, so you can look into it. Dark episode number 1 was also related to these March equinox, or March attacks when Uranus is moving into a new sign, or like I say, Saturn was moving into Aquarius, strongly influenced by Uranus in early Taurus. Okay. Now, the next date is maybe a little bit more obscure, and it is August 24th. And what I've discovered is going on with August 24th is geoengineered storms. And in particular, geoengineered storms that are hitting the Gulf Coast of the US. Okay, so for some reason, they're really hammering the Gulf Coast of the US, right? Of course, that's where the Deepwater Horizon offshore drilling rig exploded. 3 months of oil gusher, core exit, they sprayed just like, millions of, like I think over 1 million gallons of incredibly toxic chemical dispersant called core exit to basically cover up the situation. I talk about that in the article. I talk about that in the video as well. So the Gulf Coast is getting hammered, that geographical location. Now, what's happening around August 24th is geoengineered hurricanes hitting the Gulf Coast, and dramatic geoengineered hurricanes. Okay. Now, what I've discovered is that August 24th is also what is called a satanic holiday. And so it's got some special meaning in the satanic calendar. Now, I'm going to put a disclaimer out and say that I don't think the word satanic covers everything that the power establishment is about. Okay, so the actual evil, sinister, diabolical, anti-human element of the criminal power establishment is more complex than just the word satanic. People often use the word satanic, they often use the word Luciferian, but they often just use the word occult as meaning something that's evil, right? Occult just means basically secret knowledge or hidden knowledge. Astrology in general could be considered an occult subject. So occult doesn't have to have a negative connotation or a sinister connotation, but the word has gotten that connotation. Okay, so I'm putting that disclaimer out there that I understand that the word satanic doesn't fully sum up the whole umbrella of what's going on here, but it's one element that's being utilized. Okay, so it's being utilized by the power establishment for this timing. And so the satanic holiday is called Saint Bartholomew's Day. And the funny thing is that this was my grandmother, rest in peace, my grandmother's birthday. So that's one of the reasons why it perked my ears up, like, what? Huh? Oh, interesting. My grandmother was born on a satanic holiday. But anyway, so looking into it, these are the dates this is the date where the Gulf of Mexico gets absolutely hammered, and those US states down there, right? So Florida, Texas, Louisiana, all the southern states, okay, the southern states. Okay, so August 24th to 29th, 1992, we had Hurricane Andrew hitting the Gulf Coast, and that was a massive hurricane, death toll, massive destruction, okay? August 25th to 29th, 2005, we had Hurricane Katrina hitting the same area, roundabout relatively. Of course, there was just the absolutely botched rescue attempts. There was no plan put in place to evacuate people who didn't drive. People were languishing on their roofs for days. People were intentionally allowed to die, right? Number one, they were intentionally killed, and number two, they were intentionally allowed to perish. And we need to see this for what it really is, right? George Bush Jr. was at the helm during this complete debacle, and I would say an intentional botching of the. I don't think there was ever any desire to head off death. I think that what happens on these holidays and on these dates is that they're building up the energy of evil and violence and trauma, right? Traumatizing people. Because traumatized people are easier to control. The powers that be kind of feed off it. They feed off of fear and terror and anguish and despair. That's this dark energy. That's what grows it. That's what builds it. That's what they're feeding off of, right? So they're creating these mass, almost like sinister occult rituals on these grand scales to traumatize people, to indoctrinate people, to mind control people, to and also to just kind of show off their power and their prowess. They also love to laugh at us. They like to mock us. They like to put it right in our face what they're doing to us. And so these are some of the dates that come up. Okay, August 24th to 29th, 2017, Hurricane Harvey. And that one was also Hurricane Irma, sorry. And I believe there was a third hurricane that hit that at that time too. So again, during that period, that St. Bartholomew's Day, we have Hurricane Harvey. Now, August 24th, 2020, we have tropical storms Marco and Laura hitting the same area. Okay, so those ones weren't as destructive as the previous ones had been. But again, we're hitting that symbolic date. Okay, so we have these massive storms, massive hurricanes hitting the Gulf Coast. August 24th, 1992. August 25th, 2005, one day off. August 24th, 2017. August 24th, 2020. Okay, so again, it's just like bam, 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 bam. Now, I'm going to go back to the Hurricane Harvey situation because that was monstrous. That was massive what went on there. Okay, and so Hurricane Harvey occurred just after a total solar eclipse at 28 degrees Leo on August 21st, 2017. As this was going on, Saturn was stationing direct at 21 degrees Sagittarius on August 25th. So we basically have this massive new moon window, this eclipse, and then Saturn moving forward, and we have these dramatic storms, these heinous, traumatic, horrific storms hitting the Gulf Coast. Now, the thing that was important about that total solar eclipse on August 21st, 2017, was that it was visible in the United States. So this makes it more powerful for events that are occurring in the US, right? And events that are happening that attack the US people in particular, okay? So the next total solar eclipse that is going to be visible in the US is also going to be visible, it's also going to be visible all across North America. So Canada, the US, and Mexico. So this is a huge eclipse that's going on. It's actually being referred to as the Great North American Eclipse. And this eclipse is going to happen April 8th, 2024. And this was actually drawn to my attention a couple of years ago by a gentleman who emailed me about it, and I have since forgotten his name and don't have that email anymore. But after I posted my Hurricane Harvey article, he drew this to my attention: the fact that there is going to be this other total solar eclipse that is going to, encompass all of the U.S. And that this is another date, another window of time when we can expect major orchestrated events to occur. Okay. Now I would say that possibly multiple events, right? Because this is a huge eclipse that happens across all of North America, visible across all of North America. And again, it's tying into that energy from the last total solar eclipse that covered the US, which was connected to Hurricane Harvey and Hurricane Irma, and the tremendous destruction that people haven't even recovered from yet. So now we're heading into April 8th, 2024, and this great North American eclipse. And so I really want to put this into people's minds that this is a time when we are going to see potentially multiple orchestrations on the global stage, but especially on the North American stage, okay? Major shenanigans are already planned for that time. I'll tell you that right now. That's how it works. These are planned decades, potentially even centuries in advance. So April 8th, 2024. Now that total solar eclipse is going to happen at 19 degrees of Aries. And the interesting thing is that right now we have an Aries stellium that is activating this point. It's activating this 19 degrees Aries point. We also have a new moon at 22 degrees Aries on April 11th, so coming up right away. And this activates that territory of that eclipse, okay? So again, we can kind of look to the themes. Well, obviously, right, we're seeing battles between independent people, anti-authoritarian people, and the official line, the official word, the sort of violent and inhumane practices of the global government that are then trickling down into local worlds. Now, this involves the United Nations Agenda 2030. It involves these sustainable development goals that they're like really hammering home, right? They're tying the climate change panic and the climate change agenda onto the end of this COVID craziness. I don't even want to know their segue here. I don't even want to know how they're linking all this stuff up. But basically, we're going to be policed by this new green agenda. Now, smart cities and the 5G grid are a huge component of the UN's Agenda 2030 and achieving these sustainable development goals. Rah, rah. And 5G is, of course, tremendously dangerous. This is a completely socially engineered and automated existence where we are forced to live by computer generated algorithms, where our decisions are being made for us, where our entire lives, every decision we make is being monitored and tracked and data mined, right, for the 5G cloud. Now, I've written about smart cities. I've written about 5G extensively. This is all stuff that can be found on my website. And if anybody's interested, I have handouts that I can send out. It's just kind of pure information on this scheme that's being played out. Okay, so we see all of this stuff. Aries is about survival, and really we are in a time where we are having to fight for the survival of free and natural biological human beings, right? We're forced to fight to make our own decisions, including our own health-based decisions. We're being forced to fight for body sovereignty and autonomy over our own bodies, over our own bodily processes. So these Aries themes, Aries is the warrior, the soldier. It's a sign that relates to fighting. It's a sign that relates to getting into new territory. It's a sign that is related to, independence and pioneering and standing your ground. Okay, so all of these elements are sort of drawn up. Now, the difficulty, of course, is that Aries relates to attacks, right? It relates to the military and policing and attacks that are committed against the population, and in particular false flags. So false flags are basically events. For example, September 11th, 2001. Iraq is somehow blamed for the events of September 11, 2001. It was, of course, found that they had no weapons of mass destruction. They were not involved in the controlled demolition, let's be frank, of the buildings. So that's a false flag where you're blaming a certain person or a certain country for an event that's actually being committed by your own government or by your own authority figures or what have you. Okay. So false flags are rampantly tied to the sign of Aries, and like I say, in particular, March equinox. Okay, so that pretty much is like a quick hit for these dates. Just gonna go over them quickly. So we have September 11th, and then we also have March 11th that are used as dates. We have April 20th, Hitler's birthday. And then we also have August 24th, St. Bartholomew's Day, which seems to be associated with geoengineered storms that hit the Gulf Coast. Okay, so take as far as the underlying motivation for that particular geographical location. Now I know that Houston, Texas has been one of the kind of epicenters that's being hit, and Houston, Texas is the hometown of George Bush Sr., I believe, George Bush Sr. So Texas is tied in there somehow. I don't know exactly. But, and then again, both March 11th and March equinox. So March 19th, 20th, those are all dates that are being utilized. There will, of course, be many other dates that are being used because it's such a complex scheme. And like I say, they have, hundreds and hundreds, thousands of years of this knowledge that they've been collecting. They've been building on the trauma imprint on these dates for centuries at this point, right? Just repeating it and repeating it and repeating it. And of course, dates in the calendar have a connection to astrology as well. And I can maybe look into that a little bit more deeply in the future. But this is just to show that both astrological events and numerology, as in certain dates in the calendar, are being used to perpetuate these trauma-based rituals, these trauma-based events that are being intentionally created and intentionally unleashed on people. You can think I'm crazy if you'd like. I've outlined the long history of geoengineering and weather warfare being used. I mean, they've been using weather warfare since at least the 1950s. They've admitted to using weather warfare and manipulating the weather since at least the 1950s. So imagine what the capabilities are in 2020. There are a number of different people who, some people think that these events are being generated through HARP. Some people think they're being generated through the Doppler weather stations. There's a process called in-place sequential water. See, I'm a writer, not a vlogger, but yeah. So there's in-place sequential water generation, something along those lines. And there's a man called Weather Wars 101 who talks about this. His theory for how they're creating these storms. So basically there's well documented information on, in particular, the U.S. government using weather warfare, but multiple countries around the world are using it. Again, like I say, there are multiple videos and official documents where high-level politicians and other people are talking about the New World Order, global governance, all of this type of stuff. So as far as, if you actually don't know these things, it's because you intentionally don't want to know these things. You intentionally don't want to look at it. So it might seem safer and easier for you to just declare me a lunatic fringe conspiracy theorist. But I'm actually just a person who's done independent research. I'm a person who was born knowing that there was something tremendously wrong with the way things were going on this planet. I've always had a major, sense of horror at the authoritarian power structures that people are playing along with. So I've done my research and I've done my digging, and whether you want to discount all of this, whether you are a coincidence theorist and think that this is all just coincidence, that you're free to believe that. But I would suggest that that is naive at this point, to believe that these events are not occurring, in an orchestrated fashion, and again, timed to these dates. So that is it. That's the basic rundown. And I will post some links in the description to follow up information or articles that I've posted on this topic. And I will continue to cover this topic as things roll out.